Hey guys, so Netflix has released yet another original series, this time by the title of Atypical. Now this one is about a teenager named Sam who has autism, and essentially is dealing with his life as well as his family's struggles of not only the day-to-day, but Sam's struggling with trying to figure out his interaction with girls, trying to figure out if he wants to go to the school dance, and essentially trying to get laid. Now, I was pretty excited when I saw the trailer for this show because I love a lot of the Netflix original series. I thought it was going to be something more along the lines of 13 Reasons Why, where it'd be talking more about a subject. In this situation, it would be autism. That would have a lot bigger impact than I expected, because 13 Reasons Why really shed the light on like teen suicide and teen struggle, things like that. I was really hoping that Atypical would shine that light on autism, but it really wasn't that, unfortunately. It didn't have that same impact, which was really unfortunate. And it's not that Atypical is a bad show. I just felt like that it had so much potential to follow in some of the same things and have the same impact that 13 Reasons Why did. However, it just didn't really have as much weight behind it. And that is where I started to fall short a little bit. And the story of the show was actually very interesting. I was very captivated by the struggle of a child with autism as well as how it impacts the family. That was the thing that captivated me the most when I wanted to watch this series. Now, the thing that I feel like they dropped the ball just a little bit is that they really focused on one child who is on one portion of the spectrum who's very high functioning. They sort of mention it in another episode where the family kind of goes to the support group, where there are families who have less functioning autistic children. So there is a massive spectrum that the autism spectrum is. I mean, there's people that are extremely functional and may not even know they have autism. And then there's people who just are struggling day to day with daily interactions. And I feel like they really focused on the Sam's version, which was extremely high functional. And they didn't really go too in depth with really how vast this spectrum can be. Yeah, they mentioned it, but they didn't really go into some of the struggles that people on the spectrum may go through. But the vast majority of the series really focuses on Sam's struggle and trying to fit in and be normal, and how he is trying to figure out his place in society while struggling with his disease, which really doesn't allow him to recognize situations or really recognize emotions until it's essentially too late. So a lot of it focuses on Sam's aspect of it, which I thought was really great, but I know that there's plenty of vast other things happening with people on the spectrum that I feel like they should have gone a little bit in depth. And in addition to that, I feel like there were certain points where they just didn't go as deep as they could have with Sam's struggles. There were some times where maybe he had a minor freak out, but that was mainly towards the end of the series, and like it didn't really show a lot of how much I think he was affected by it. But then again, he was one of the more high functioning autistic children versus people who are affected by the most casual of interactions. So I mean, I feel like they sort of did good, but also sort of missed it a little bit as far as how deep they really could have gone on the subject matter. Now, for me personally, where the story lacked a lot was whenever we sort of detracted from Sam. Because we're not only focusing on Sam in this series, we're also focusing on his sister, his mom, and his dad. Those are essentially all the main characters of this series. I feel like the sister had one of the better stories. Dad was okay, he was sort of in and out, but the mom, I think, sort of had the worst story. Now, not to say that the acting was bad, I just felt like the story was a little bit heavy-handed at times. Some of the situations that they're going through, I just wasn't really that big of a fan, especially since this show was, in my opinion, supposed to be focusing on the child with autism and his struggles. I feel like that was the most interesting point. So whenever we detracted from that and focused on something maybe the mom was doing or the dad was doing or the sister was doing outside of the interaction with Sam, yes, they're allowed to have their own lives and everything, but I felt like it sort of detracted from what the impact of the series could be. But I do have to say, as a slight disclaimer, I thought it was extremely well done. The things that these characters are doing outside of their lives, away from the impact of what this child with autism has had, because essentially they're so focused always on Sam and his struggles with autism that when they get away, there are certain things that they really want to do or want to experience, but almost essentially can't. So it does a good job of seeing, people wanting to do what they want to do as being a normal human being, but at the same time struggling with having to always worry about their autistic son or brother. And I felt like that was a good balance, but at the same time, like I said, when it detracted away from Sam in that main storyline, that's when it kind of got a little bit iffy for me. And as for the acting in this series, I did like it a lot. I felt like a lot of the characters were pretty spot on. Nobody really did a bad job, I would say. A lot of the characters did actually really well. One of my favorite characters was his sister, Sam's sister, along with Sam, of course. And then Sam's sort of best friend. Well, his best friend is technically a turtle, but his other best friend, who he works with at a technology store. I love that kid. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was really funny, and it was actually a lot of fun when Sam had his interactions with him. That was actually really interesting because it was Sam being introduced to the world and sort of had his hand held essentially through most situations, but it was from one character's perspective. So it never really. He was essentially the comic relief of the show. So I mean, there was a lot of situations where it would be funnier because he was involved or because of how he told Sam he should be interacting with certain situations, and that just made it so much better. But those were two of my more favorite characters. But other than that, everyone else did really well actually in the series, both dealing with the drama and comedy aspects that were peppered throughout the series. My biggest complaint about this series, however, other than the fact that, that we sort of got detracted from Sam a couple of times, was the fact that I couldn't quite get a grip on the tone. Now, this show it's about 8 episodes long, about half an hour each, 40 minutes each, which is actually really short. But it felt like it struggled between being a Netflix show where the boundaries can really be pushed and things can really be shown in a way that you really don't expect, versus being like a sitcom or a regular cable television show. It really shifted back and forth. There were a lot of times where I would say this was an absolute great drama where a lot of good things were happening. Well, not good things, but it was actually done very well. And then there would be a scene or two peppered throughout the series again where it felt like it was a sitcom, and it sort of detracted and it kind of threw me off a little bit. Not necessarily just the situations, but maybe ways certain shots were set up or various aspects of the show where I just wasn't sure how to feel about the show. Was it more of a serious drama about, a kid struggling with autism and how it impacts his family? Or were they trying to pepper in, some comedy, situational stuff? And it just kind of shifted back and forth a couple of times, and it was really hard to get a grip on. So that's why I kind of struggled with it. And it was that shift back and forth that really threw me off every once in a while. Like, I was really into some of it, and then other parts of it I would sort of just be sort of distracted because I felt like it was a situation where it wasn't really worth what was actually happening in the show. And that's where I felt like it kind of was imbalanced and had a bit of a tough time getting a real read on what the show was trying to be focused on. Other than that, though, I really don't have a whole lot of complaints about this show. It was actually pretty good. I don't think it really hit its stride, though, and really focused on the autism aspects that I was really interested in until the latter half of the season, especially towards like the last episode. That's when I think the real gravity of this show hits a lot, which is a little bit disappointing. I wish it would have hit a little bit further into the series, like maybe episode 2 or 3. Just so we can see like the various aspects of what's going on with his family and how Sam is affected by various situations. I think that would have been a lot more impactful, but it definitely hits its stride in the later part of the season. It does have plenty of good stuff peppered throughout, though. I just feel like I wish that stuff that gravity really hit in the second half of the season was pushed forward a little bit. But what can you do? For those reasons, I'm going to give Atypical a C+. So guys, those are all my thoughts and opinions on Atypical. Be sure to check it out. It is now streaming on Netflix if you wish to watch it. Leave a comment in the comment section down below if you've seen it and your thoughts and opinions on it, as well as hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. But those are pretty much all my thoughts for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.